Oh, it's under, if you click on participants.
On participants?
Yeah, if you click on, for at least on a Mac, if you click on participants, there's a place where it says raise hand.
There you go.
Oh, and there's a lot of people that have already raised their hand.
Yes.
Okay.
Which is good.
All right.
Shall we get started?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to start with Drolma.
Hello. Yesterday I was asking, well, it's about shamatha and vipassana. I have heard that in order to have a good vipassana, you should, you should like reach first the city of shamatha in order to have like a good concentration on your vipassana meditation.
Yeah.
Although I've heard sometimes that to reach or to get the shamatha realization, it takes a while, but some others says that it doesn't take that much if you're truly like, I don't know, focus on meditation. But I guess that it's different between someone that it's a monk or a nun and someone that is just like practicing in this modern world. I mean, I guess that now it's different because we have the opportunity of this super kind coronavirus retreat, but then again, how long would I expect to reach shamatha? I don't know if it would be possible in live, or I don't know. What's your experience on that?
So I think my first thought was that you don't have to reach the, beyond the 9th level, that we call it, of shamatha in order to make your vipassana effective. I think that you can develop enough focus to start to make changes in your mind, even at a very early stage. So I think that it can have a positive effect. I don't think that it makes a lot of sense to just practice shamatha and not practice any analytic meditation until you achieve it, especially like you say, if for one thing, we don't have we don't necessarily have the trait already in our personality to be able to settle our minds easily. Okay, and culturally it's not necessarily supported in the modern day. We may not have been brought up in a context where it was encouraged for us to sit still and meditate. So yeah, these are hurdles that we all get to overcome. So I don't think that you should wait. I think it's very important, and I think that putting more emphasis on shamatha is important, so that when you do vipassana, you have some focus. But I don't think you have to wait. Yeah. And I think that you can make progress on shamatha, even with the distractions that we have. But it does take a commitment. It takes a commitment to simplifying your life, definitely. And then I don't think that monks and nuns necessarily have an advantage. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on, we'll go with Roshana. I'm going to unmute you. Wait 1 second. There we go.
Hello.
Hello?
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I hope you're doing good. So I have like 2 questions. First of all, I'm really sad about how the people are suffering due to the current events, and deeply saddened that even one of my close friends is at the starting stage of the virus, and I pray that he should recover soon. But is it wrong, or is it okay to think that the universe wants a balance and that the virus is kind of like a vaccine to the earth because of the growing population, how us humans have been hurting the mother nature?
I don't think it's bad to think that. It may actually be what's happening. I think we don't know at this point if that's really the truth, because I guess we've seen it in other extinction events we've seen viruses come through and level populations in other natural settings, and I'm sure that it's possible that that's an explanation for it. that we, you know, somehow overpopulation has gotten out of control and that this is the natural response to that. I think that's possible, but I don't think we can say for sure until, you know, we get some more research.
Yes, yes, I understand. So, my other question is, I mean, my apologies if this is too early to ask, but I would like to know about your thoughts on the astral projection through meditation.
So they don't talk much about astral projection in Buddhism, and yeah, I don't think I can answer that one. Because in the way I was trained, and I was trained in a specific school of Tibetan Buddhism, which is the Lupa school, and they don't necessarily talk about that. So I can't really answer it because I haven't been trained in it.
Okay,
So
okay.
sorry, yeah.
It's okay, it's okay. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Hope you have a great day. Yeah.
You too.
Okay, moving on, we go to RJ Pierce. You can now ask your question.
Thank you. These have been really helpful, Venerable Drolma. Thank you so much. Thank you to you as well, Felipe. My question is, when often our friends will come to us with problems, and I want to be able to give them the best advice possible, but I understand that my life is different than their life, and any experience that I can draw on may not necessarily be helpful for their situation. So what I was wondering is, in the Buddhist context, or are there questions that we can ask our friends to help aid them in maybe making good decisions, or just to relieve their suffering a bit?
Yeah. I think your first tendency to direct them to their own inner wisdom is a really good response. That listening to them, asking them just even for them to draw out what their situation is, what it is they're afraid of, what's going on in their minds, can help bring forth, with your compassionate, you know, empathetic listening, can help bring forth from them their own wisdom. So it's not like you necessarily have to have the answers to their situation, that you can, just by being present and listening fully and becoming interested, and also having an attitude that they do have the ability to solve the problem, that they do have the ability to figure out their own way. When you have that attitude toward them, then they find it in themselves more easily. So yeah, the specific questions are really going to have to do more with, you know, their situation. Yeah. Okay.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. I really
You're
appreciate
welcome.
it.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so we move on to Roshni. You can now ask your question.
Thank you, Felipe. Good morning, Venerable.
Hi.
I have two questions. You had somewhere in the first or in the second class spoke about interconnectedness of the world, and how anything that when we feel anger or hatred or any of the negative emotions, what we need to remember is that we are all interconnected. So you gave the example of how we don't punish our right hand if the right hand has done something wrong, because it's part of our own body, right?
Mm-hmm.
But Venerable, what I am struggling with is to see how people who are doing actions and who believe in things that are so wrong, how do I feel interconnected with someone, with, you know, these kind of people? That is my first question.
Okay. So so first of all, talking about the right hand and the left hand, you wouldn't necessarily punish your right hand. You would stop it from doing what it's doing. So it's not that we are condoning everything that everyone does. Okay. Clearly, there are actions in the world that are harmful to others. Okay. So, and your question is about how do I feel connected to those beings who are doing these harmful actions. Okay. And so there's a practice of equanimity, which is where we start to balance our view of others and see them as instead of, so usually what we do is we tend to label people. Okay. We label them either their friends or they're enemies or they're strangers. Okay. And if they do things that harm us, we see them as enemies. Okay. So that actually, that perspective is from the point of view of us, right? From our point of view that they are harming me. So even when they harm my loved ones or they create suffering in the world, that's from my perspective. If I were to step in their shoes, okay, see it from their perspective, one way that we can start to see is that all beings are equal in wanting to be happy and not wanting suffering. Okay, so I want to be happy. That person who is harming others wants to be happy. I don't want suffering. That person who is harming others doesn't want suffering also. So on a very basic, very ground level, okay, we're all the same in that way. Now, their way of going about creating happiness for themselves or avoiding suffering is misguided, isn't it? Right? When they create suffering for others, they are creating suffering for themselves. Okay. And so I can start to recognize that even more, that they are not only do they want to be happy and don't want suffering, but they're also creating the situation from their point of view again, where they're creating suffering for themselves. And so not only do the beings who are suffering from their actions deserve my compassion, but they also deserve my compassion. Okay. And when we start talking about interconnectedness and my connection with others, it becomes in a very indirect way, doesn't it? In the sense that my connection to someone else, you know, who is, we say, you know, there's 6 degrees of removal that you know, almost anyone you can find. We have to, I think we have to contemplate on this, and we have to start to widen our perspective of interconnectedness, in the sense that maybe in this life I will never have, you know, something that that person does will not directly impact me, you know, but if we start to widen our perspective, we start to see that in fact all beings are connected. So widening our perspective talks about going beyond this life. Okay, which you may or may not work for you, you know. So from a Buddhist point of view, we can talk about, you know, if our minds are beginningless, okay, so if we agree with that understanding that the mind has been in existence forever, then we have had multiple lifetimes, right? Multiple opportunities to have interactions with every single other mind that exists, okay? And they have had the opportunity to interact with us. In fact, what they say is that every single being, we cannot say that every single being has not been our mothers, who has not birthed us, has not nurtured us, has not cared for us. So if I then start to see that even that person who is harming someone else in a past life has probably been my mother, I have had this close, positive, wonderful relationship with that being. And so for me then to, what I can start to see is that my mother has gone crazy. You know, my mother is doing things that harm themselves and others. Poor mother, I want to help her. I want to save her. I want her to be happy for real. I don't want. So then my connection becomes that much closer to that person.
Okay.
Right?
Can I ask the second question?
Sure.
Um, um, it is to do with today's meditation experience. While meditating with Felipe guiding, at a certain point, I just lost connection with what Felipe was saying, because my brain, I can say that my brain just stopped thinking. It was just there, and I was aware of Felipe's voice in the background. And I began, like Felipe had instructed, by focusing my mind on a pressure point. But then, and I also that it was changing, all of that I was aware, but at a certain point, the mind just went blank. Although I was still intermittently aware of Felipe's voice in the background. And then suddenly I had this, I've been having a problem in my left arm and elbow. And suddenly there was intense pain coming out from these two regions, which lasted till the end of the meditation.
Okay.
And again, I was aware that, hey, this pain has popped up now. And yet I couldn't think. That was all. I mean, it was just, the brain was there, but, and it just observed, okay, there's this. So what is this?
So, well, I don't know the causes of why the pain in your elbow appeared at that time. So many causes and conditions come together. The mind and spacing out, a brain blip, these things do happen, right, to our minds. And so it is a function of the mind that and the body, of course, that things happen, right? That we cannot always stay on a specific topic that we're trying to stay, that our minds, we have so many causes and conditions also in our minds for us to have these different experiences. So we can't know necessarily what causes them, okay? They do happen. But what we then do is then we can choose, okay, am I going to stay with the pain in my arm? Am I going to stay sort of spaced out, or whatever you may have been aware of? I don't know exactly. You could go more deeply into what was happening when the thoughts stopped, okay? It could be that there was an awareness of a non-conceptual state of awareness itself. That's possible. That you could just suddenly be more connected to your observer. And then the other things go by and you're aware of your awareness, okay? That's very possible, okay? So, but then you choose, am I gonna stay with this, or am I gonna go back to, meditating on impermanence? So you choose. But these are, just mental states that occur, that now you have so much more, that you can investigate, that you can work with, and you bring in, okay, where am I going to go with this? And the fact that you could still hear Felipe's voice while you were absorbed in these others' experiences shows that you're starting to get some perspective on choosing, where do I want my mind to go? Okay, do I want my mind to go back to listening to Felipe? Do I want to become more absorbed in this state? Do I want to focus on the pain in my arm? Where do I want to go with my mind? So it's very good. Yeah,
Okay.
it's an increase in your awareness.
Okay, thank you so much,
Dude,
Venerable.
welcome.
So we move on to Sandeep Jinda. You can now ask your question.
Thanks, Felipe. Thanks, Drolma, for the sessions. These have been really wonderful. I've been to Sita a few times, and every time it has been very pleasant experience. And so really happy to be able to join into these sessions. I have a couple of questions here. First one is like I have been practicing meditation for a few years, although not like literally on a daily basis, but yeah, I do practice meditation. So the question is like, primarily I find that I am able to meditate best when I am focusing on my mind or within my brain itself, like the sensations which are there within my brain. That's where I find, I'm able to meditate best. I find it difficult to probably focus on my breath and do meditation while focusing on the breath. But yeah, while doing meditation on the brain and the sensations within the brain, I have had some really great experiences where like for minutes at end I'm thoughtless, and it has been a great experience. So the question here is like, am I moving in the right direction? Like, is this a right direction to continue to focus on those kind of sensations and practice meditation? And another thing is that because we do not have a master available nearby to guide us on day-to-day basis, or so how do we progress, or how do we know that if we are moving to the next levels of meditation, or if we are doing anything wrong?
Yeah. So what do you mean by sensations in the brain?
So, it is like, for example, when you start focusing, I generally start focusing on my forehead. That's where, I start focusing on when I start my meditations. And as I go deeper into the meditation, I start realizing that there are certain sensations which are there within the front side of the brain or some of the back side of the brain. So as I progress to, in the meditation, those kind of sensations, I'm able to observe them very, probably much more over a period of time as I go deep into my meditations. So that's how they progress. And I cannot probably explain how exactly they feel, but yeah, it's a time when I'm totally thoughtless. I'm not thinking about anything, and I'm just deeply immersed into what exactly is happening within my brain.
Okay. I think that's a great way to develop your focus, to develop your shamatha. And I think that you are on the right track, because sometimes they do recommend using the third eye as your, what we call your support for developing your shamatha. And the aspect of going non-conceptual is also very helpful. So where you go from here really depends on where you want to go next, so you could start to apply this focus that you've developed into these sensations to something, to a topic, like in a guided meditation. Bring that, that laser beam of your mind now to experiences in your life or specific topics, like that. So that's a possibility. Yeah. As far as a teacher goes, there are still lots of books that are out there that are really helpful to you, even without a teacher, that can talk to your experience. There's His Holiness, if you're interested in the stages of shamatha and like evaluating where you should go next, as far as like how if you're focusing on the sensations in the third eye, how often do you actually get pulled away, and what is happening there? Is it you get pulled away with excitation, or do you get pulled away because you're starting to get dull and fall asleep? They also will talk about like other objects if you're interested. Not necessarily, you don't have to go to the breath, but something like the awareness of awareness. So Alan Wallace has a really good book on this called Attention Revolution. And this talks about the stages of shamatha, the stages of developing calm abiding.
Sure.
His Holiness also has a book on this. It's called Stages of Meditation, I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
So there are a couple of books you have recommended. Attention Revolution, if I'm correct, and the second one is
Yes.
Stages of Meditation.
Yes.
Okay, sure. I do read a lot of books, and I think this will be useful. Thank you.
Yeah, that attention revolution, I'll talk to some of your experiences, I think.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Sure.
Okay, moving on. We go to Sarfaraz. Now you can ask your question. Hello, Sarfaraz, are you there? Perhaps not.
Okay.
Then we move on to the next one.
Oh, he's there. You just didn't unmute him. I see. Oh, there he is.
There he
Hi.
is.
Yes. You just unmuted him.
I
But
unmuted
can't
him
hear
now.
him. But I can't hear him. I can see him.
Oh, that's interesting.
Sarfaraz, I can't hear you.
Oh, that's weird. It's unmuted.
Yeah, it is.
Maybe type in your question.
Yeah, Sarfaraz, you may. Okay, he is.
Sure, I can read it. Please type it.
I can read it too.
There we go.
Okay.
My question is that death is inevitable, and yet we all tend to forget about it and live as if we're going to live forever. What can we do so that we don't forget about it as much? Any daily practice would be really appreciated.
So one thing you can do is do this meditation on death. So the slide and the teaching that I did of those 3 points of death is definite, time of death is uncertain, and the only thing that will help you at the time of death is spiritual practice. Those that's a traditional meditation on death. This you can find this one in the Kathleen McDonald's book, How to Meditate. And yeah, I don't know. There you can go back to Tushita recordings. Almost always we do. Felipe has a death meditation that will guide you. So that's another one. The other thing you can do is there's a way that you can meditate on it where you imagine actually dying. So you can visualize the what it would be like for you to, you know, when you first hear about, say you have a disease, you can imagine that, and being given a certain amount of time to live, and then going into you know, telling your family, going into when you start not being able to do your regular activities, when you are lying in bed and you can't get up anymore, and slowly taking yourself to the actual brink of, you know, the end of your life. And in the process of that, you are thinking about it and bringing it into your reality. So that can be very powerful as well. And then the other one that I mentioned during the class was where you, whenever you hear of someone dying or you see like a dead body, you have this, you immediately have this association that that will be me someday. That will be me. And we see death a lot. You know, we see animals and, you know, insects dying all the time, and now we hear about it in the news, you know, the different people that are dying. So just remembering that it isn't happening out there, it is something that will eventually happen to me. So that's how you can do that. Welcome. Good.
Okay, we move on to the next one. Dr. Indrajit, I'm going to mute you now. There you go.
Yeah. Good morning, Venerable. My question is, one question is personal and another one is a journal discussion which I wanted to have. The first question is, when I start meditating, there are certain type of a certain a certain type of dreams I get during my sleep. Sometimes I really get frightened with those dreams. This doesn't happen very often. This is when I enter into some kind of meditative state. I myself do not know what kind of that meditative state is. And like something is frightening me or probably killing me, I feel a lot of pressure on my chest or sometimes on my throat. It's sometimes very dangerous. And second is that I want to know about like how when we are doing vipassana, how it is different in different traditions. Like when you said Goenkaji has a different way, and say the Tibetan meditation, Vipassana has a different way. So how these two are different from each other? Thank you so much.
Okay.
My questions are-
Sure. So I think when we start to meditate, we definitely become aware, more aware of those different levels of our minds, okay? So it isn't necessarily that your dreams are any more frightening than usual. I think that you're just probably more aware of them, okay? One thing that also helps when you're meditating is that you can also start to become more conscious while you are dreaming, okay? So something that I have taught myself to do is that you do this by setting the intention before you go to sleep. Have you heard of this before? Where
Uh,
you no?
no.
Okay, so setting the intention before you go to sleep that you are going to be more conscious in your dreams. And what you can practice doing is bringing yourself out of your dreams when they're real strong nightmares, when they're very frightening. And that was the first step, was that I would wake myself up. So I don't typically have nightmares that are out of control any longer. They as soon as they start, I have trained myself to bring myself out of them. Now, a better response, actually, according to something called dream yoga in Tibetan Buddhism, is if I could start to become aware of the fact while I'm dreaming that it's just a dream. Okay. And then no matter what happens in that dream, I can't be hurt because it's just a dream. And so if we can start to become even more conscious in our dreams that we are dreaming, and you do this the same way, you give yourself a suggestion throughout the day as you're falling asleep to recognize while you are dreaming that you are dreaming. So it's like waking up while you're still in a dream. And then even if frightening things happen, you can respond to them. You start to be able to change the dream. But at first, just recognizing it, then no matter what they're doing, it's like watching a movie, you know? A movie can't hurt you. If they're shooting at you, it's like, it's in a dream, right? So that's what you can do to work with those. And then your second question was about Vipassana and these two systems. From and I have a very limited training in Goenkaji's system. My understanding of it is that they move with Vipassana, they move from an experience, a meditative experience. So like he directs you while you are, so first you start off with the shamatha on the body sensations, right? And you go very deeply into those body sensations. And then he introduces the fact that those body sensations are constantly changing, okay? So the concept of impermanence, of the constantly changing nature of things, is introduced after you've had this meditative experience of the constantly changing nature of things, okay? So from a Tibetan perspective, one will start off with the idea, and this is within, again, it's within the Gelugpa tradition. The Kagyu and the other traditions schools may have a little different take on it. But from a Gelugpa perspective, we teach you about the reasoning of impermanence. Like I gave you, went through that whole description of how aging is something that you can't see, and how the individual moments in time can be divided. So we teach you about subtle impermanence, and then we have you meditate on it. So it goes from a conceptual perspective to a more experiential perspective. Okay, so that's how they're different. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you
You're
so
welcome.
much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, we move on to the next one. Girish Prabhu, you can now ask your question.
Yeah, hi, Venerable. My question is about the non-virtues that have been mentioned in the book that you asked us to read. And of the 10, I'm quite comfortable with the 9, except for killing. Or it's almost like, for example, if you look at what is happening in the world with billions of dollars spent on defense and armies killing each other in the name of protecting their countries, how do you deal with that?
So you're not talking about your own non-virtues, you're talking about other people's non-virtues?
Yeah, because
like
I'm
governments, right?
Government's non-virtues, and then a lot of it kind of bothers me and creates an imbalance in me. And so how do I deal with that?
Mm-hmm. Okay. So unless we can, become elected, right, and make decisions, about how money is spent, which some of us can, and if you can do that, that's amazing. If you could go into politics and influence your own country's, how it spends its money, that would be brilliant. But most of us don't, don't have those conditions. They haven't come together for us to enter into that system, so we can't necessarily affect it directly. What we can do is work on the ways in which in our own minds we create the causes for us to have that attitude or have that perspective that somehow rejecting or harming or hurting others is somehow a positive thing. Okay, so on a very, maybe I don't go out and kill people. I don't, in fact. And I never joined the army. I was never in the army. But but there have been times in my life when I have thought that retaliating against someone who had harmed me was the way to handle that situation, that was the way to solve the problem, that somehow by harming this other person, then they would stop what they were doing. Okay, so that attitude alone is what then promotes the attitude in governments, that somehow this is the way to stop things that other people are doing. Okay, and so instead of finding other ways, like His Holiness often talks about dialogue, that countries can solve their problems better through talking, through sitting down at the table and trying to find a way to resolve conflicts. And so if we can start to do that in our own lives, instead of rejecting people, pushing people away, ending friendships, that sort of thing, if we can start to find another way to look beyond, people's harm that they have done and try to find ways to stop it in the future instead of harming them, then that's how we do it. That's how we address the situation. And that brings it more under our control.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, moving on to the next one. We do Pranav. You can now ask your question.
Thank you, Drolma.
Oh, okay.
Thanks a lot for all that you're doing. I was wondering about the role of a teacher on the path. whether it is somewhat important or whether it's really, really important. For example, just like praying to the teacher, even if we have just a photograph, and accepting whatever comes in life as if it was sent by her. That kind of approach to life.
So the first question, within Buddhism, the role of the teacher is, first, the role of the teacher is to give you the information, okay? So to give you the concepts, to teach you the techniques, to, spread the, show the world view, okay? So the reality that we may not already be aware of, to emphasize that for you. Now, traditionally in Tibet, there were not that many books, okay, because they didn't have parchment and paper and that sort of thing. So the way in which, the only way you could get the teachings was through going and seeing and having a relationship with the teacher. So nowadays there are lots of teachings that are available on books and on video, that we can get the information, okay? So many of us can go very far in our practice without having a direct relationship with the teacher, okay? Now that said, as we go further and further along our path, it can become really helpful to have a relationship with someone who is further along the path that we want to practice. So like, Venerable Rabina says, if you want to learn how to bake cakes, you go to someone who knows how to bake cakes, okay? So one way in which we can bring that person into our lives is we can start to imagine having a relationship with them. So trusting that when we meet that person, we will be able to recognize them, and we will be able to develop a trust in them. Now, this other aspect of, if you've met your teacher and you already know that this is your teacher, but you don't see them very often, that's really no problem, because the role of a teacher ultimately, eventually, is to quash this ego, okay, that believes that we already know everything that we need to do. And also it's to get us to relate to our own inner guru, okay, our own inner teacher. And so those two things we can do by recognizing that there is someone who knows better than us already, okay, that will eventually lead us to that inner guru. But we can't skip that process. It has to be external first before it can come internal, because our egos are so good at taking over and thinking we know already what we know. And so using that, that idea of a someone greater than ourselves can help us get in touch with, this idea that our egos don't already know what we need. So you can use it that way, and then try to develop a relationship with that person as much as possible, because then when you start developing that relationship with them, they really become powerful in terms of tripping you up and letting you know that you don't know. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Should we do one more?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to unmute Paul. Paul, you can now ask your question.
Yeah. Hello, Venerable Drolma. Thank you so much for doing these sessions. It's really, really helpful. And my question is sort of connected to another question that was asked before, the one about how the virus may in some way be some sort of way for the earth to even out things or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And something about it just doesn't sit right with me, because I feel on two counts. First of all, if we were to consider that that were the case, then it would almost be like it would be giving ourselves an excuse to sort of be happy or rejoice in the death that would be occurring, which I think is bad. And also, I would think that if that were the case, then wouldn't the earth have to, in a way, be a sentient being? Which, as you know, as far as I'm concerned, you know, if I do something, you know, or if a child does something, right, and the parent punishes or does something to even the score, that makes sense because the parent is a sentient being reacting to the child. But in order for the earth to do something like that, it would have to have sentience of its own, which I'm not convinced that's the case. I'm more convinced that there's a lot of different sentient beings on the earth making up this interdependent network of beings. So yeah, it just, that confused me, and those were my thoughts about that. So if you could help me think more about that, that would be great.
Okay. Did you have a question about it specifically?
Yeah, specifically, I'm just trying to think, am I sort of overthinking it, or am I on the right track there? I'm trying to understand, you know, I guess maybe this has to do with karma and the causes and conditions for why the people who are getting sick would be getting sick. Just confused.
Yeah. So definitely the situation is very complex, right? And there are lots of causes and conditions that are going into it. And we can't necessarily know all the causes and conditions that go into why it's happening, or why one person is getting sick and another person is not, because of all the huge amounts of factors that go into it. It's beyond our, small minds right now to know exactly what it is. Now, as far as, is the earth sentient? I have no idea. Maybe at some point, we will discover that it is. But then if we look from this complexity, even if the earth is sentient and has this intention, there's also all the other causes and conditions that would pervade whether this happened or not, or whether one person dies or another person doesn't. So I think your thinking is good because you're widening your perspective. You are looking at all the possibilities. And then the other aspect that I heard you talking about is perspective. The fact that we can look at any specific event and we can see it, both its positive sides and its negative sides. Okay, so definitely having compassion for the people who are suffering, and that's so, and not wanting them to die, of course, and doing everything we can not for them to to die, and also looking at it from this other perspective of it being possible that it is a response to our human condition, that there are that disease has the function of decreasing the population, that we can have these perspectives, and not saying that one is good or bad or wrong or right, but that this is the complexity of the situation and is what is happening, and not and not becoming complacent and saying, oh, this is just natural selection, so just let it happen. Absolutely not. I would, and I don't think anybody who has that attitude is saying, okay, so then don't give people medical care, or don't, like, we're not saying that in any way. I don't think. I hope not.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That helps me a lot, actually.
Good.
Thank you.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Thank you very much for staying for this Q&A. And we'll see you again tomorrow. Okay. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye. Don't forget to dedicate.
Yes.